representation of the outbreak, the COVID-19 crisis in China in February. I've doctored the image a little bit to replace the bright red coloring, the much more neutral gray. You can substitute whatever the numbers are on your particular business challenge today. 3 questions need to be asked in trying to understand the meaning of the data. The first concerns the semantics. In this particular example, does population density accurately predict the spread of COVID? Would it have been a much more sensible choice to look at the questions of socioeconomic status, education, or eventually better decision-making in trying to understand how COVID developed? We can also pose the question of syntactics. Is the question of infected cases the most important in understanding the challenges that lie ahead? Rather than talking about mortality, would it have made more sense to talk about morbidity, the social and physical, mental and physical impact of the pandemic ahead? And finally, in looking at the figures, we have to ask the question of pragmatics. What is the relationship between data and action? Do these figures actually push us to do anything other than panic? After looking at the figures, we have to put them in context. Frames are what actually gives data its meaning. In other words, data has no meaning intrinsically, other than in the stories we use to make the data come to life. Frames refer to describe what is productive and what's valuable. If we replaced mortality rates with morbidity, would the story make more sense? In trying to plot the road ahead, do we need to invent a cure, or do we need to innovate? Okay, we'll try to go a little bit quicker. Can we change the notion of stockholder to public value? We also can realities of what we can see from the future that lies just beyond the horizon. We use algorithms and heuristics to plot what's visible. By working on human and machine intelligence, we can extend the horizon. The horizon's often blocked by the clouds of risk, uncertainty, and ambiguity, by cognitive biases, by the primacy of rational thinking rather than emotional thinking. All of these questions need to be analyzed and resolved if we want to understand how we can co-develop and machine intelligence. Then finally, I wanted to focus on the oracle, because in Alberti's view, as important as the frame and the horizon, we also needed to understand the relationship between the manager and the data. Often there were hands or birds, actually people outside the frame. Is the meaning of the story in the data itself? How can we use data visualization, analytics to improve the importance of the story? Is the key to value in the future in the data in the story, or in using AI to develop human intelligence? In terms of the takeaways, I'd like you to reflect that perhaps we are in a moment in time. We, as human beings, consumers, managers, can change the course of history.
I would propose that all the people who have some question, again, please put them on Q&A. We still found them in the chat channel. Makes it a bit hard for us then to filter it. Please meet Lee at the backstage. You can actually get into there with the link that you see in his ad and discuss the other question. Thanks a lot, Lee. And I would love now to introduce you already to the next ones, because we really need to keep on track. I'm so sorry for the stress. We've learned about that. We will do it better next time. So now it's my very nice welcome of Gabriel and Eran. They're going to present together. Eran Sosnovic is a brand builder and digital native. He's founder and CEO of Exceed, a digital marketing end-to-end agency actually based in Geneva. He's 11 years of experience in building global brands and digital marketing expertise, and he's a business partner of Saitier. Saitier is the company that Eran Reshev founded. Eran is a high-tech inventor and entrepreneur. His past companies actually has been acquired by IBM, like Sanctum, also Skybox Security, which has acquired by Provenance Equity Partners, and Collective, which has been acquired by the Israeli aerospace industry. Kol hakavod, Eran. So, Eran is the founder of Saitier, a model-based algorithmic content generation platform, which he's also going to introduce now. The stage is your guys. Eran.
Yes.
Model-based algorithm content.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
Hope you are as well. Yes, Eran, I think stage is yours.
Yes. Thank you very much, Andy and Dalit and the rest of the team for this opportunity to present here. I'm going to talk about algorithmically generated truth. Specifically, about how model-based marketing can help us in the days of the corona. But before we actually do that, let's talk a bit about what model-based marketing is. When we speak about model-based marketing, what we mean, and it's a term that we invented, we are talking about three stages. First one is actually to model, to take a few thousand key opinion leaders and influencers and actually map out and understand who those people are. Once we know who they are, we can actually analyze the information flow around them. We can actually understand what they're talking about, what they care about, which kind of information they are most interested in, which one they're actually not very interested in. Armed with this information, with who those people are and what kind of information they share, we can actually make a lot of recommendations. Specifically, we're going to talk about algorithmically generated content because that's what's interesting here in our pursuit to actually understand what's real and what's fake in the days of Corona when we have lots of information overload and information noise. I'm going to talk about how we actually modeled doctors, medical doctors, that specifically deal with infectious diseases. So we actually began this process by finding a dozen of doctors. We found them manually. Okay, so here is an example of one of them. That's Lawrence Boston. Okay, and he's one of the handpicked seeds that we gave our algorithm. Using this seed, the algorithms went onto social networks and actually found many more people that are connected to our seed account and have meaningful interaction with them. And this allows us to build a model. For example, one of the people in the model is Scott Gottlieb. Probably some of you know him. He's the ex-FDA commissioner. He's a very important person in this community. His opinions really matter much. He's a real expert. And the next step that we have done in this model is actually to figure out what is the inference rank. Inference rank is another thing that we have invented in order to actually understand what's going on here. It's similar to what Google is doing with websites and page ranks. But in this case, we are measuring the influence level, how important each of those persons are, specifically within the model that we have created. So essentially, in this case, you can see that Scott has quite a lot of influence among his peers. So what he's saying has a lot of meaning to the other experts, which is a good sign because it allows us to say, oh, so it means that if he's saying something, it's probably important.
Indeed. So what we saw till now is the use of the platform to build models around the coronavirus pandemic, but actually the platform could be used to build key opinion leaders ecosystem in any domain and in different scopes. It could be used for executive in the telecom industry, cybersecurity experts, marketing or digital marketing officers, among financial community, and so on. And in these types of models, we will see an ecosystem with different key opinion leaders, such as industry journalists, guys that are covering this industry, peers of the different executives. So it could be in the CMO example, other CMOs of similar industry leaders, influencers, media groups, NGO members, and so on. And of course, this will differ case per case. Generating in an automated, fast, and above all, trustworthy way, the most relevant stakeholders ecosystem in a specific domain would greatly help organizations in their communication efforts. And we will hear more about that as we proceed. Eran, please.
So the next step, now that we have a model, we found those hundreds of doctors that we're interested in, is actually to analyze the information flow, to really understand what are the pieces of information that they care about and which one they do not care about. So let's look at how this goes. Okay? The first thing we're going to do, okay, is calculate the newsworthiness. Newsworthiness is a way for us to measure how important a piece of information, in this case, a tweet, or it might be a link, or it might be a website in general, okay, is actually important to the entire model, to the entire community. So in this case, it allows us to understand how all the experts, their combined wisdom actually is, at the end of the day, distilled into a single number. This allows us, okay, to actually do some very neat stuff. So, for example, we can find the unique topics those people care much about. You can see, for example, they care about Gilead and PCR and vaccination. Okay, of course, we compare it to the rest of the population, so we only see things that they care about that are different from the rest of the population. And next, it allows us to do some really interesting things like saying, okay, we're interested in remdesivir. It's the new drug that's supposed to be helping against the corona. We're going to find the interactions that receive the highest newsworthiness because those are most likely to be the correct one according to those hundreds of experts. And indeed, if we go into this specific interaction, instead, we just get one of the key leading doctors, okay, actually telling us exactly about what's going on with remdesivir, okay, in a very, very neat summary. So it's very helpful. We can now ignore all the noise, just read this piece of information because this is the correct one according to the combined wisdom of the expert. Now that we have the model and we analyzed it, the next step is actually to make recommendation. And specifically, we're going to show how we're going to algorithmically generate content based upon that. And in order to understand why this is important, okay, let's take a look at this website, which is updated daily. And it contains the information about the race for the cure based upon all the combined wisdom of the experts. So again, we modeled the people, we calculated their influence rank, we calculated the newsworthiness, and out of that, we know which of the articles that are being shared are actually interesting and probably correct. So you can see what the doctors are saying about vaccine. just to give you a sense why this is very important nowadays, if you actually go on Twitter and you search for coronavirus vaccine, one of the key pieces that you will find is this piece from Africa saying that Chinese have finally arrived to infect us all with the deadly corona vaccine. And of course, this kind of ability to algorithmically generate content which is based on the expert does not end with just doctors. As Gabi was saying before, we can generate any pieces of content. In this case, it's a quiz about cybersecurity and privacy. We're actually relying on the expert of chief security officers in order to generate this piece of content. Gabi?
Yes. So to sum it up, the Corona model we just reviewed is actually a specific case of leveraging the platform capabilities for this very specific occasion, which we all hope soon will be like a long memory. But really the power of Cytea platform is actually in helping organizations in their external communication efforts. Organizations and corporates have realized that they cannot just provide their goods or services, but are expected by their consumers to take an active part in the bigger play of social responsibility, like gender equality, diversity, inclusion, sustainability, etc. And to participate in this game is a strategic choice of those organizations, but to execute it and to build their equity as key thought leaders in a certain domain is not a simple task. They need to know to whom they need to talk to, what to say, and then to invest a huge effort in generating content and distribute it ongoing. So having the ability to model the relevant key opinion leaders ecosystem, and then to sit on the flow of communication between the different stakeholders and get all the insights, trends, and the other interesting analysis, then to be able to participate in this conversation while having almost completely automatically generated relevant and trustworthy, as we saw, pieces of content is a huge, significant help in bringing this strategy to life and in a sustainable way. And this is really where the magic comes to life. And when we talk to different organizations, and those organizations took indeed upon themselves the challenge to take part and to be actively involved in an ecosystem and to build themselves as some key thought leaders for a certain domain, this is where really they see the beauty which is there. You need to try it in order to see how it comes to life. Thank you very much for the attention and hope to meet you at the backstage.
Thank you very much.
Insights. It will be my pleasure also for you to find the people at backstage for more discussion. In the Q&A, we couldn't find anyone. So again, please, you will see there is a leash for Q&A. And a leash. The US. Teams globally. Sorry, my voice. Her life story has been featured by Oprah, a documentary produced by award-winning filmmaker Robert Chung follows her cutting-edge research in mitigating tropical cyclones. Ria is an author of the book All Things Are Possible, Unleashing the Superhuman Within. Besides all, she's also reigning Mrs. Grand Universe in 2018. Ria, the stage is yours, and thanks a lot for your contribution.
Thank you very much for that very gracious introduction. I appreciate that. I just want to make sure. Okay, wonderful. I'm not using slides today. Alex said earlier today that cognitive technology, which would include AI technology, is 10% humans and 90% or 10% technology and 90% humans, which I would agree with. And so what I'd like to just speak on today, maybe a little more informally, is on the role of humans in artificial intelligence. Because the white elephant in the room is, is AI going to just take away everyone's jobs? That's what everyone wants to know in terms of, more the population. And people want to know, is the computer just going to take over? And what specifically are we going to be looking at in the future? And there are various futurists who have written on this. And so certainly there is this incredible synergy between the capabilities of humans and the capabilities of machines, as it helps us to make systems that are more accurate, more resilient, more efficient, faster, higher capacity for data and processing, and doing things that we could have never done decades prior. So with all of this increase in quality of life, what we see is that the global economy itself is increasing. And by the global economy, it's not just measured completely in terms of financial reward, but also, this was something that we discussed rather in detail at the World Economic Forum in Davos, which is where I had met Dallas and Andy. By the economy, we're talking about the very quality of life for others. And I think that during this coronavirus pandemic, we're having to shift things from just a purely profit-driven perspective to a perspective that actually measures the quality of our lives, which is not necessarily a complete component of what the stock market is doing, or even how much financial gain there is. It's a bit of a shift. And so certainly the finances are important, but if cognitive technology can help us increase our quality of life, that's really ultimately what the goal is. And so in that regards, AI does have the power to transform not just our technological landscape, but our very economic future. And this is critical in the months and years to come. Of course, in light of this pandemic, should there be other pandemics, which probably there will be, and any other global economic interruptions. So here's the $1,000,000 question is, will artificial intelligence replace humans? Or when we institute a system, what is the role of humans? So I'm just going to break it down into what I would refer to as 7 components of how humans are needed in AI. And it's a very nuts and bolts kind of way of thinking, but it helps us to learn how to leverage the talent with the technology. And so first of all, when we're building a system, as you know, we need to have systems that are based upon wisdom, knowledge discovery, even choosing what kinds of AI options are best. And so in the knowledge discovery process, it takes mathematicians, computer scientists, even visionaries to find out what works and what doesn't. The next thing would be testing the system once we've built that system. And that would be in the realm of your software engineers, people like that. So, there needs to be rigorous troubleshooting, making sure everything works under different real world scenarios. The next aspect is, how about monitoring that system? And I'm speaking all of this from the perspective of first-person experience. I am CEO and founder of a company in artificial intelligence called StatWeather, and we use artificial intelligence to predict climate and weather. And so we were, ranked as the #1 climate technology globally and have different accolades because AI can be used in this process. So this is all of the things that we've gone through in the last 10 years in developing our own systems and merging together machine with human. So as we're monitoring the system, I know in our company, we've had to certainly hire on data analysts so that they can provide the sanity checks to make sure that the system is continuing to do what it's supposed to do. The next step is debugging. And that is always a very huge task for computer programming, for computer programmers, where there are issues or breakdowns. And so there's also failure analysis, cause analysis. Then we have a backup system. What happens if the system doesn't work? What happens if you have a power outage? What happens if there are, a hurricane comes in and the system can't be used? Are there manual backups? So it requires those kinds of system analysts and those kinds of human backups in place to meet those demands. Then we also have people like business analysts who can go in and get the customer requirements and see that deliverables from the system will match the customer's request. Because what we also see is that there is a lot of need for bespoke solutions. That's a part of digital transformation as well. And then we also need technical writers and analysts who can document this entire system and people who can train others, that others can learn how the system works in case if changes need to be made or in case if other employees come in and need to use that system. So what we see through this is that AI is not just a standalone process, but it requires an entire ecosystem of human skills to kind of flesh out what Daleth was saying at the very beginning, that AI is 90% humans and 10% machines. It can automate tasks, it can bring us computations and predictions at extraordinary speed, eliminating repetitious, manual, tedious jobs, but it also creates the opportunity for new, well-paying jobs from a technically skilled workforce. So I think that countries can leverage this information to build a relevant and a properly trained workforce. What I found when I go into universities and do various talks and presentations and I speak to grad students and professors and people like that is that there is actually a chronic disconnect between academia and the commercial sector. So in other words, there's a disconnect between what people are getting trained in and then the workforce that we're generating. I know that's certainly the case in the US and in a lot of Western countries because sometimes they're operating in two different worlds, or they might be operating in a vacuum. So the needs have to be aligned, even in terms of our own children, as we look towards the future so that they can thrive in a digitally transformed society. Lastly, we know that there are also going to be traditional needs of a business for effective communicators, marketers, sales forces, financial experts, the media, savvy executives who can lead and operate a company. So these jobs are here to stay and they will not go away. AI can improve our lives, but with this rise in technology, it's most important to see the skills that are needed today that will help to propel us into our tomorrow. So thank you very much. We're going to transition over into our panel.
Just lost it. Give me a sec. Okay. It's gone in the chat again. We have to make sure that we can track that much better. I'm really sorry. Please, I saw there were two people having a question. Put it back into the chat and we'll get back to you then. So now, Ria, please remain with us because we're going to start the panel. And the panel will be led by Antonio Russo. Antonio is head of Deloitte's Analytics and Cognitive Advisory in Switzerland and one of our strong Swiss cognitive partners. Antonio will introduce the other panelists while we're bringing them on virtual stage. So this time, it's the first time we're trying it with a panel, so just keep with us and give us some seconds to put everything on screen.
Thank you very much, Dalit. So while we wait for the other panelists, I'll just give a quick intro. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our panel session. AI, it's beyond technology. So my name is Antonio Russo. I will facilitate the session. I lead innovation for Deloitte here in Switzerland, and I also lead a team that looks after cognitive and analytics. So as we all know, AI is much more than technology. I think, Ria, you brought some perspective just now on this. And I think to make most of AI, we really need to consider a wide range of capabilities and requirements. And so I'm looking forward, to discuss this with the panel that we have today, and particularly what is required to really drive AI successfully. So I have a fantastic panel with me today, people with different backgrounds and experience, very rich. So really looking forward for a very lively conversation. So Ria, welcome to the panel. You've been introduced. Thanks for sharing some of your, really wide experience early on. I'm looking forward to discussing this topic with you. Our second panelist, just waiting for Umberto Michelucci to join. Umberto studied physics and mathematics. He's an expert in numerical simulation and statistics. He is currently responsible for deep learning, new technologies, and research at Telsana Insurance. So hopefully we can welcome Umberto very soon.
Umberto has difficulty to join, as well also Camille. Please go ahead.
All right, so Ria, that might be a conversation just between the two of us. And Camille, if he can join, he leads Unit 8 AI practice. So in his capacity, he collaborates with organizations to help them identify and adopt AI solutions. He advises companies on AI strategies and helping translate business problems into very concrete. Great. So Andy, I'll suggest we carry on, and Ria, let's just have a bit of a chat fire discussion then, chat conversation. So I'd like to touch on different dimensions, but maybe start with collaboration and capabilities. I think if you study a little bit how companies innovate and how they adopt new technologies, very often this comes into leveraging partnerships, whether it's within organizations or outside, working with startups, with alliance partners. I was really curious to have your perspective about, what does it take for organization and how would that collaboration manifest, and how easy or difficult it is really for organization to innovate outside their own four walls.
I have a wonderful example on this, just from my own experience. Over in the United States, we have NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is a government-led organization. And within that, they actually have various public-private partnerships, and my company had engaged in a partnership with them. But I'll just tell you a little story, just a small little story. So about 8 years ago, I met a director from NOAA at a private sector conference on energy. And we were just kind of a younger startup at the time. But she said to me, her name was Jenny Disson, and she said, I think we need to have some kind of a campus where government, academia, and the private sector can come together to solve climate issues. And so, she thought of this, and then she said, can you write me up an executive summary of what you think such a partnership would look like? And so, we wrote that up, we drafted it out, and then a few years later, it came to pass. Now, when Jenny and I were talking, we were thinking maybe we would get 5 different companies in Asheville, North Carolina, where the National Climate Data Center was located. It ends up now they have 70 companies. So there are about 70 companies that are engaged with this campus, in addition to the government, in addition to the universities in North Carolina in the area, working on these big climate issues. And I think the thing to understand is that, first of all, these types of partnerships generally come about through somebody, through the work of like brainstorming, or, there's some brainchild, which in this case was Jenny Dissent. I feel like I was just kind of, helping her along with that vision. And then it also requires just, building. There were philanthropists involved, just wonderful people in the community, because when you're tackling huge societal issues such as climate change, it really requires the whole community. It requires all of those talents. And we're seeing that now with COVID, where it's requiring the private sector, requiring the governments. It's also requiring the universities. We're seeing technology coming out of MIT and, companies and government. We're seeing all of these entities working together.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Ria. And I guess probably the hardest is to start, right? I think once you engage, it's very easy. And I think, as you illustrated in your example, it just scales because people see value.
Scales. Yes.
Maybe just a follow-up question. And Camille and Umberto, welcome. I'm glad you made it through.
Yes, we've managed.
One observation, maybe, and keen to get your perspective. I think what we see, especially organizations. Just a follow-up question, and Camille and Umberto, welcome. I'm glad you made it. I think if you can go on mute, thank you. It's very hard to drive innovation, especially now with the uptake of AI and data within the 4 walls of an organization. The immune system of the corporation would very quickly attack whatever new comes and whatever great ideas might be. And then in one of the previous Swiss Cognitive events, we talked about the permafrost, which is having a big ambition at the top. Leaders would understand, and they need to demonstrate and show that they are riding the wave of innovation. People, maybe a generation or millennials, that are more, digital natives, will definitely have big interest. But then there's this middle management, which is probably the single biggest blocker, because people are used to a different model, right? Is you manage, how many people you manage. So I was curious, in your own respective experience, Camille, you as an advisor, and you, Umberto, driving innovation in your organization. How do you keep innovation immune from the antibodies of the organization?
Camille, you want to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks a lot for having me here. And I guess, Antonio, to your question, I guess I'm carrying 2 different types of the experiences. One, having driven actually the internal innovation within a large corporate, and actually also exiting the corporate world to basically help run a startup environment. So you're super right that the bigger organizations tend to slow down the innovation if not managed properly. And I guess the recent example that I actually came across in Switzerland is the ideas of the innovation labs, or the D labs as the different parties call it. And it's basically still an organization within the corporate world, but also which allows for the collaboration with the universities, which allows the collaboration with the startup environment. And this allows, I guess, a little bit more freedom to some of the innovative and digital native talent to actually run much quicker with the projects and with the innovation. And yet, at the same time, I mean, we need to ensure that those type of innovation zones, at the end of the day, do have the executive sponsorship.
Any additions from your perspective?
Okay, now it's muted. Okay, can you hear me well now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So what I think one projects like software projects, and that means that you don't know exactly if what's coming out at the end is exactly what you're expecting. There is a lot of
agile, where maybe the scope is not clear, but you give you give a given capacity, budget for people to innovate. And that's not very intuitive for people because people are very deterministic. They want to know how much money I'm going to give you, your point about I'm going to get at the end. So it's very hard to shift the mindset for people to say, I'm going to invest money, and what I give people, what I put together essentially is capability and effort for a period of time. And then, of course, the direction of travel. And, and then I iterate in an agile way. I also think on measurement, it's very important what you measure at which point in time. So I work for a large corporation, and I know if I try to measure too many things too early, I would just kill any great ideas. But
I agree with you.
At some point, you need that view about the return on investment. So what I was curious to hear from the team here is if you think about ways of working, methods, culture as well, goes hand in hand. What's your experience of traditional waterfall versus more agile, and how effectively organization can really put through agile team, multidisciplinary, drive innovation? I don't know, maybe Ria, you want to start?
I'll wait till.
You've been just unmuted.
Okay, wonderful. What we found through innovation is that we as entrepreneurs have to find those early adopters, those people who are our advocates within a corporation or within some type of company, within the people who fund these types of technologies. And that's not always an easy process, but you see, when you're a young company, it's like finding your tribe. I mean, who are those people who we can link with, who will support us? And that might only be that 1 in 100, that you're going to talk to. So it does require going to these conferences or whatever, talking to a lot of people, really find who can help catapult us and to create those synergies to take us to the next level, take us from the early adopter stage into more mainstream cases that we can reach the mainstream business. So it is a process, and it does take time. And so I think it really is a lot of legwork, a lot of what in the US we call the hustle of finding those people. Because when we have an innovation, we'll have to a certain degree the use case, but I think that the entrepreneurial journey is always going to be just that. It's going to be a journey of constantly learning and of constantly proving out your technology and constantly shifting your technology. The customer demands that you never knew were even there, that only became exploited because you were out there on the field engaging with those customers.
Yeah, and I think that there are great learnings from startups, right? Who are very good at pivoting very quickly from the original idea by engaging customer and trying to understand. So very often what you have in mind in the beginning might not be what you land as a product. And we just discussed later, So if you truly work agile, you believe in the capabilities and the direction of travel, and you adopt a certain methodology to pivot quickly, then I think the likelihood of success is much higher. But I think traditional corporation, in my experience, really struggle with that, because they're used to deterministic, waterfall, I give you a budget, we'll see you in a few months, and I want an outcome. So you want to add something
more? Yes,
more?
I think what you're saying is right. And the trend that we, have been seeing like in Silicon Valley and places like that is that the corporations are doing more acquisitions. And so, they're saying, okay, the whole, like the method of Bell Labs and these big, we have our own R&D. Okay, it could take you 10 years to develop that R&D and you have all of this investment. When a startup over here has already developed it, I can just snap them up for $10 million and get all their programmers.
Yeah.
And, use the Google model. And so you have the acqui-hire acquisition. And so we're seeing that companies, a lot of these guys, they're it's not just the internal process, but they're looking out there to see who they could bring in.
Yeah, and your competition is not always who you think it is, right? Umberto,
I think this is...
Sorry, Camille, please.
I was just going to follow up on what was just mentioned, right? I mean, that idea of the kind of open ecosystem, the ability to quickly react to the market changes, and also to bring in the external innovation is actually quite key, because a lot of the companies that are out there are not digital natives, right? Some of those companies are just adopting some of the latest technologies, and I think that ability to quickly react to the market, pull in the right projects, the right innovation, the right ideas as well from the market is quite critical to success as well.
Umberto.
Start like a journey that you started. Is not, for me, innovation is not something, oh, wow, we do it for 6 months and we have our product. That's already wrong from the start. So you have really to say, we want to invest there and we know that it's difficult. And that's one point, that is a journey never started. The second point that I think is absolutely fundamental is that